The moment you wake, before you're even fully aware of who or where you are, a battle is fought and lost. In that sacred liminal space between the dream world and the waking world, you are at your most suggestible, your most powerful. But you give it away. You give it to your email, to the news, to other people's problems, and in doing so, you surrender the creative power of your entire day. This story is about to reveal the single most important and most overlooked secret of conscious creation. It will give you the precise 90-second protocol that the world's most powerful manifestors use to deliberately create their reality before their feet even touch the floor. This is not another thing to add to your morning routine. This is the routine, and it will change everything. Leo was a man running on a timeline that was not his own. At 35, he was a highly successful and highly stressed quantitative analyst for a hedge fund in Manhattan. His life was a masterpiece of reaction. From the moment he woke to the moment he collapsed into a restless sleep, he was reacting to market fluctuations, to news alerts, to his boss's demands, to the endless stream of data that was both his livelihood and his prison. He was a master of predicting the future of the market, but he felt completely powerless to shape his own. His most sacred and most secret desire was to leave. He dreamed of starting his own impact investment firm, a small, agile company that would use his analytical genius to fund revolutionary green technology startups. He dreamed of a life of purpose, of creation, of a quiet, unshakable confidence that was the polar opposite of the high-wire anxiety he lived every day. He wanted to build something that would last, not just chase the fleeting profits of the next quarter. His antagonist was his own deeply conditioned reactive mind. It was a habit so ingrained it felt like a part of his own biology. The first conscious act of his day was to plug his brain directly into the global matrix of anxiety and competition. He would flood his subconscious mind in its most receptive and vulnerable state with evidence of lack, of problems to be solved, of a world that was happening to him. He would then spend the rest of his day in a state of frantic defensive effort, trying to use affirmations and visualizations to fight against the very reality he had so powerfully programmed himself into at 5 a.m. His manifestation practice felt fake and powerless because it was a tiny, conscious whisper trying to shout down the roar of his subconscious programming. Is he doomed to be a slave to his own reactive habits? His dream of a purposeful life forever held hostage by the tyranny of his morning phone check? Or is there a simple, profound, and powerful protocol that can allow him to seize control of his own consciousness in the one moment that truly matters? If you have ever woken up and immediately felt behind, as if you are already losing a race you didn't even know you were running, subscribe. This story contains the secret to your new beginning. Part 1. Leo's reactive reality finally produced the catastrophe he was always subconsciously expecting. The previous loop closed. His morning habit was revealed as the source code of his anxiety. The new loop opened on a Tuesday. A complex, automated trading algorithm he had spent 6 months designing went haywire due to an unforeseen geopolitical event in Asia. An event he would have seen if he had been looking at the right data stream. By the time the New York market opened, his fund had hemorrhaged a catastrophic amount of money. The failure was his, and it was absolute. His boss, a man who saw the world in terms of profit and loss, did not fire him. He did something worse. He put him on probation, forcing him to work under the humiliating supervision of a younger, more aggressive analyst. The shame was a physical weight. The failure was not just a professional crisis, it was an existential one. His entire system, his entire philosophy of outworking and out-analyzing the world, had failed him. He began taking long, aimless walks in the very early hours of the morning, hours before even the city itself seemed to be awake. His walks took him further and further downtown, into the quiet, forgotten corners of the financial district. It was on one of these walks, in a tiny, hidden courtyard between two towering glass skyscrapers, that he discovered it. A small, exquisite Japanese rooftop garden, a secret world of green and silence floating above the concrete canyons. In the center of the garden, a very old man with a face like a serene, smiling Buddha was meticulously tending to a collection of bonsai trees. He moved with a slow, deliberate and joyful grace that was utterly alien to Leo's world of frantic, high-speed transactions. This was Mr. Kenji, a retired diplomat who had been the garden's caretaker for over 50 years. Leo found himself returning to the garden every morning, a silent observer. He would watch Mr. Kenji perform his morning ritual. The old man would not begin by watering or pruning. He would simply stand before a young, unshaped sapling, his hands held open, his eyes closed. He would stand there for a full 2 minutes in a state of what looked like silent, loving communion. Only then would he pick up his tools. One morning, Leo found the courage to ask, "What are you doing in those first few minutes, before you start the work?" Mr. Kenji looked up, his eyes holding the deep, quiet wisdom of 1,000 sunrises. "Ah," he said, his voice a gentle, melodic whisper, "the most important part of the work. I am not seeing the tree as it is. I am not worrying about the pests of yesterday or the weather of tomorrow. I am holding in my heart the feeling of the tree as it already is, in its most perfect, beautiful, and complete form. I am reminding it of its own destiny. I am setting the frequency for its growth for the entire day. The first light is the most important." The metaphor pierced through Leo's analytical mind. He too was a gardener, and his life was his garden. He had been starting his day by frantically pulling at the weeds of yesterday and worrying about the storms of tomorrow. He had never once taken a moment to simply hold the vision of the perfect, beautiful flower. He found himself telling this old, wise man everything. His dream, his failure, his morning ritual of anxiety. Mr. Kenji listened, nodding slowly. "You are a good gardener with a very bad habit," he said. "You allow the world to plant its seeds of chaos in your garden before you have planted your own seed of intention. The first moments of waking are the sacred soil. The mind is soft, fertile, and ready. What you plant in that soil in the first 90 seconds will be the blueprint for the entire day." He then gave Leo a task. "For 1 week," he said, "you will not touch your phone when you wake. That is the first and only rule. You will do nothing, simply lie there and feel what it feels like to not immediately react. That is all." He has found a master of a different kind of growth, a man who understands the sacred power of the first light. But can a man who is addicted to information, who is terrified of falling behind, possibly endure the silence of doing nothing in the one moment he feels he must be doing everything? Part 2. The first morning of the experiment was a failure. The 5 a.m. alarm went off, and Leo's hand, operating on a deep, conditioned reflex, shot out towards his phone. He caught himself, his fingers hovering just above the cold glass screen. He pulled his hand back as if it were a hot stove. This closed the previous loop. He was committed to the task. The new loop of conflict began instantly. Lying in the silent darkness, forbidden from his ritual, his body went into a state of acute withdrawal. His reactive mind, his antagonist, unleashed a torrent of pure, high-grade fear. "You are falling behind," it screamed. "The Asian markets are moving. There is news you are missing. Your competitor is probably already at his desk. You are being irresponsible. You will fail again." The craving for the data, for the connection, was a physical ache. His nervous system, accustomed to its morning jolt of cortisol, was in a state of panic. He lasted less than a minute before he snatched the phone and opened his apps. The familiar rush of anxiety, a strangely comforting and toxic relief. His internal conflict was a war against his own neurology. He was an addict, and his drug was information, the illusion of control. The feeling of not knowing was for him the most terrifying feeling in the world. He tried again the next day, and the next, each morning, a new battle. He would manage to last a few seconds longer each time, but the feeling of falling behind, of being disconnected from the global pulse, was almost unbearable. The external conflict was his new reality at work. His probation meant that he had to submit a daily market analysis and opportunities report to his new supervisor, the younger, aggressive analyst named Marcus. The report was due by 8 a.m. This was a deliberate power play, a way to force Leo to be even more hyper-connected, more reactive than ever before. Marcus would send him texts at 5:15 a.m. "See that spike in the Nikkei? What's your take?" It was a perfect external mirror of his own internal pressure. The world was demanding that he continue the very habit he was trying so desperately to break. He confessed his repeated failures to Mr. Kenji. He told him about the unbearable anxiety, about the pressure from Marcus. "I can't do it," he said, his voice full of the familiar shame of a man who prided himself on his discipline. "The silence is too loud. The urge is too strong." Mr. Kenji was carefully pruning a tiny pine tree, a work of decades in the making. "You are fighting the urge," he said, not looking up. "That is why it is so strong. You are creating a war. The goal is not to fight the old habit. It is to give yourself a new, more beautiful one to replace it." He then gave Leo the full protocol. "You have cleared the soil by not touching the phone. Now you must plant the seed. In those first 90 seconds when the mind is soft and the world is not yet inside you, you will not do nothing. You will do the most important work of the day. You will close your eyes and you will ask your heart one simple question. What does it feel like right now to be the man who has already succeeded? And you will listen for the feeling. That is all. You are not reaching for a future feeling. You are remembering a feeling that already exists in the garden of your own heart. He has been given the full method, a simple but profound act of replacing a negative habit with a positive one. He is being asked not just to resist, but to create. Can he possibly find this feeling of remembered success in the midst of his current reality of failure and humiliation? Part 3. The 90-second protocol became Leo's new secret battleground. The loop of his simple resistance was closed, and a new, more subtle and profound loop opened. The challenge of generating a feeling from a state of pure being, not as a reaction to an external event. The sub-trauma of his work life provided a constant, grinding pressure. Marcus, his new supervisor, seemed to take a cruel pleasure in his authority, micromanaging Leo's every move, questioning his analysis, and subtly undermining him in team meetings. The daily humiliation was a powerful gravitational force, trying to pull Leo's state of being down into the familiar frequencies of shame and inadequacy. It was the perfect real-world reflection of his own inner critic. Another sub-trauma was his relationship with his father, a retired history professor who had always been quietly disappointed by Leo's choice of career, seeing it as a soulless pursuit of money. They had a weekly phone call that was always polite but distant. Leo had always felt a deep, unconscious need to prove his worth to his father, a need that was fueling his desperate chase for a success that even he no longer believed in. But in the sacred, silent laboratory of his bedroom, in those first 90 seconds of the day, something began to change. The first few days of practicing the new protocol were difficult. He would ask the question, "What does it feel like to be the man who has already succeeded?" And his mind would draw a blank. The feeling of his current failure was too loud. Then he remembered Mr. Kenji's words, "Remember a feeling that already exists." He stopped trying to invent a future feeling and started searching for a past one. He remembered a time, years ago, when he had helped a small, struggling clean energy startup secure its first round of funding, not as a paid gig, but as a pro bono act of passion. He remembered the feeling he had in that moment, a feeling of clean, quiet, profound purpose. It was not the high-stakes, adrenaline-fueled win of the trading floor. It was a feeling of deep, resonant rightness. This became his anchor. Every morning in those 90 seconds, he would not visualize his future company. He would simply re-inhabit that feeling of purpose. He would breathe it into his lungs, feel it in his cells. He was not faking it till he made it. He was rooting himself in a truth that was already a part of his own history. He was watering a seed that was already in his soil. He has found his anchor, a true, authentic feeling of purpose to plant in the sacred soil of his morning. But this is a quiet, internal and subtle act. How can this tiny, 90-second seed of a feeling possibly compete with the loud, aggressive and demanding reality of his 16-hour workday? Part 4. For 3 weeks, Leo performed his 90-second ritual with the quiet discipline of a monk. The loop of his initial struggle was closed. Now, the final and most critical loop opened. The moment where the inner shift produces an undeniable outer result. The feeling of purpose he cultivated each morning began to subtly but powerfully change his perception throughout the day. The turning point was not a single dramatic event, but a series of small, strange, and powerful synchronicities. He started to see the world differently. He would be scanning the financial news, and his attention, now tuned to the frequency of purpose and green technology, would be inexplicably drawn to small, overlooked articles, to footnotes in dense reports that he would have previously ignored. He started to notice a pattern, a quiet, emergent trend in the sustainable energy sector that no one else was talking about. He was not analyzing. He was recognizing. His quieted, receptive mind was now able to perceive a signal that was invisible to the frantic, noisy minds of his colleagues. One morning after his 90-second ritual, he felt a powerful, intuitive nudge to research a small, obscure solar power company in Finland that had just patented a new kind of energy storage technology. There was no rational reason for it. They were not on any of his firm's watch lists. But the feeling was so clear, so compelling, that he spent his entire day in a state of quiet, focused flow, researching them, building a financial model, creating a thesis. That evening, a high-level emergency meeting was called. A major tech fund was in crisis, and the partners were looking for a safe but innovative place to move a massive amount of capital, and they needed an idea by morning. Everyone was scrambling, pitching the usual safe blue-chip stocks. The room was thick with panic. This was the moment. The old Leo would have been the most panicked of all, frantically running 100 different algorithms. The new Leo sat in the back of the room, completely calm. He had the answer. He had had it since 5:01 a.m. He waited for everyone to finish. Then he stood up. He did not present a complex analysis. He told a story. The story of this small Finnish company, of their brilliant technology, of the new emergent pattern in the sustainable sector. He spoke from his new center, from the quiet, unshakable confidence of his morning feeling. He was not a desperate analyst trying to save his job. He was a man sharing a vision. The room was silent. Then, the senior partner, a man famous for his brutal skepticism, looked at Leo with a new kind of respect. "That," he said slowly, "is the most compelling, out-of-the-box idea I have heard in 5 years. Do it." In that moment, everything changed. He had not just saved his job, he had redefined it. He had proven, in the most high-stakes environment imaginable, that a state of being was a more powerful analytical tool than any algorithm. A quote from the physicist John Wheeler, which Mr. Kenji had shared with him, became his lived reality. We are not just observers, but participators. In a certain sense, this is a participatory universe. He had participated in creating the signal, and then he had simply observed it when it appeared. He has had his proof. His 90-second ritual is not a spiritual fantasy. It is the most potent and practical tool he has ever discovered. He has the respect of his superiors and a new sense of his own power. But is this enough? Will he use this new power to simply win at the old game? Or will he use it to finally create a new one? This profound shift in the very first moments of the day has sparked a new idea for you. Subscribe for more stories that provide practical, powerful, and life-changing protocols. Part 5. The successful Finnish investment was a legend at the firm. The previous loop closed. Leo had his undeniable proof. The consequences of this success, however, were not what he expected. He was offered a promotion, a massive bonus, a corner office. He was offered the keys to the kingdom he had once so desperately wanted, and he felt nothing. The thrill, the external validation, was hollow. It was a taste of a food he no longer craved. His first action from this new state of being was to perform his 90-second ritual and ask a new question. What does the man who has already succeeded and is deeply fulfilled feel like? The answer that came back was not the buzz of the trading floor. It was the quiet, solid, joyful feeling of building something meaningful. The consequences of this deeper alignment were swift. He respectfully declined the promotion. Instead, he wrote a new proposal. He proposed that the firm allow him to create a new, internal impact investment division, with him at the head, using his new methodology to find and fund the next generation of green technology companies. It was an audacious, unprecedented move. He was using the power they had given him to change the rules of the game. To his astonishment, they agreed. They were not fools. They had seen the results of his new method. They did not understand the how, but they could not argue with the what. His life at work was transformed. He was now the master of his own time, his own focus. He and a small, hand-picked team spent their days in a state of quiet, inspired research, looking for the signals that were invisible to the rest of the market. He had created his dream job inside the very machine he had once dreamed of escaping. His relationship with Marcus, his former tormentor, shifted. The younger man, humbled by Leo's success, came to him as a student, asking to learn his method. His personal life bloomed. His constant low-level anxiety was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady presence. He was no longer a ghost in his own life. He was fully there. He even called his father and for the first time had a real conversation, not about money or success, but about purpose, about history, about the future. He was healing relationships that he didn't even know were broken, simply by changing his own state of being. He has created a new reality for himself, a perfect synthesis of his skills and his soul. He has found his purpose and his peace. But the original dream, the dream of his own firm, is still there. Is this new, comfortable reality the final destination? Or is it just a beautiful and necessary stepping stone to an even greater manifestation? Part 6. For a year, Leo ran the Impact Investment Division with a success that was both quiet and spectacular. He had created his own garden within the corporate jungle. This was his final test, the one promised in the last chapter, the test of comfort. He had a dream job, the respect of his peers, and a life that was 1,000 times better than it had been. The temptation to stay, to declare this the final victory, was immense. This was the most subtle and powerful form of resistance he had yet faced, the resistance of the good enough. He consolidated his growth by deepening his morning practice. He continued his visits to Mr. Kenji's rooftop garden, but now as a friend and a peer. They would sit in the pre-dawn quiet, not talking about techniques, but about the nature of growth itself. A bonsai tree, Mr. Kenji told him one morning, as he carefully wired a new branch, can be beautiful and healthy in its pot, but its true destiny is to be a tree. The pot is not a home, it is a nursery. This was the final piece of the puzzle. Leo realized that his division, his dream job, was his pot. It was a safe and beautiful place where he had healed, grown strong roots, and learned his own nature. But it was not the forest. He began to use his 90-second ritual to remember a new, more expansive feeling. Not just the feeling of purpose, but the feeling of sovereignty. The feeling of being the source, not just the manager. The feeling of his own name on the door. The process was gentle, without struggle. He was not trying to escape a bad situation. He was joyfully and deliberately growing beyond the confines of a good one. He spent the year not just producing incredible returns for his firm, but also building his own personal network, cultivating his own future partners, and quietly, methodically laying the groundwork for his own eventual inevitable departure. He was tending to the tree, knowing that one day its roots would peacefully and powerfully break the pot. He has overcome the final, subtle temptation of the good enough. He is ready for the forest. But leaving a place of safety and success is a different kind of challenge. What will be the final, graceful act that allows him to step into his ultimate manifestation? Part 7. The moment came, not with a bang, but with a quiet, mutual understanding. After 2 years of running his division, he had created a system, a culture, and a successor in Marcus, whom he had trained in his methods. His work there was complete. The loop of his integration was closed. The final loop, the one of his sovereign creation, opened. He prepared for his departure with the same conscious intention that now defined his life. He wrote a letter to the board, not of resignation, but of gratitude and evolution. He explained that his nursery had done its work, and it was time for the tree to be planted in the forest. He scheduled a meeting with the senior partner, the man who had first believed in him. He did not go to ask for permission. He went to announce a new beginning. He brought with him a single, beautiful, and perfectly shaped bonsai tree, a gift from Mr. Kenji. He laid out his plan for his own independent firm. He was not leaving to become a competitor. He was leaving to become a collaborator. He proposed a strategic partnership where his new, agile, independent firm would act as a scout for the larger company, finding the small, brilliant saplings of green technology that were too small for the big fund to notice. He was not asking for a handout. He was presenting a new, evolved, and mutually beneficial ecosystem. He was not just leaving the nest. He was redesigning the forest. The proposal is on the table. It is a testament to his new, integrated, and non-adversarial way of being. Will his old firm see this as an act of betrayal, or will they have the wisdom to recognize it as a brilliant and beautiful evolution for them all? Part 8. The senior partner, a man named Robert, listened to Leo's proposal in his vast corner office overlooking Central Park. He was a lion of Wall Street, a man who understood power and leverage. He looked at Leo, and then at the small, perfect bonsai tree on his desk. The old paradigm would have dictated a battle, a non-compete clause, a hostile separation. But Leo was not operating in that paradigm. He was broadcasting a frequency of collaboration, of win-win, of a shared and prosperous future. He was holding the firm but gentle state of the man who had already succeeded in creating this new, beautiful reality. Robert was silent for a long time, looking out at the park. "When I was a young man," he said, his voice surprisingly soft, "this business was a jungle, red in tooth and claw. You either ate or you were eaten. I got very good at eating." He turned back to look at Leo. "But the world is changing. The jungle is giving way to the garden. Your method, the results are undeniable, but it is more than that. The energy you have brought to this floor, it is calmer, it is clearer, it is better." He looked at the bonsai tree. "You are right," he said. "This is not a betrayal. It is a graduation." He stood up and extended his hand. "We will not be your first client, Mr. Leo. We will be your founding partner." The promise of the introduction was fulfilled. The 90-second ritual was not a trick to get what he wanted. It was a tool to become the man who no longer had to chase. It was a method for setting his own internal state so profoundly that the external world, in its own time and its own perfect way, would have no choice but to rearrange itself in a perfect harmonious reflection. The partnership is sealed. The dream is manifest in a form more beautiful and collaborative than he could have ever conceived. But what is the true, lasting impact of a life that is consciously and deliberately created every single day from the sacred soil of the first 90 seconds? Part 9. Solace Capital, Leo's independent impact investment firm, opened 6 months later. It was an immediate and profound success, not just because of its financial returns, but because of its culture. It was a company built on the principles of the rooftop garden, patience, intention, and a deep respect for the power of the first light. The 90-second protocol was the cornerstone of their company philosophy, a shared secret that gave them their unique, intuitive edge. Leo's life was a testament to his own teaching. He was a leader in a new, more conscious form of capitalism. He was wealthy, but his wealth was a tool for creation, not a measure of his worth. He found a deep, loving partnership with a woman who was an architect, a woman who understood the art of building beautiful, sustainable structures from a clear and powerful blueprint. He had learned the ultimate secret of the first 90 seconds. That liminal state is the daily meeting with the architect of the universe. In that moment, you are handed the blueprint for your day. For years, he had allowed the world to scribble its own chaotic, fearful plans all over his blueprint. Now he understood. The work was to simply and with a quiet, loving authority pick up the pen and draw the one beautiful and perfect line that was his own. His journey has created a new model for conscious success. But what is the next day for a soul who has learned to be the master of his own dawn? We see Leo a year later. It is 5 a.m. He is in a beautiful, light-filled bedroom, not in a high-rise, but in a home he designed with his partner, a home that backs onto a quiet forest. His eyes open. His hand does not move. He lies in the soft pre-dawn light. He closes his eyes. He asks the question. He feels the feeling. He is not just manifesting a day. He is blessing it. He is not just creating a reality. He is becoming it. The 90 seconds are not a technique anymore. They are a prayer. They are a homecoming. He learned that the most important transaction of the day happens in the quiet market of your own consciousness, in the first 90 seconds after you wake. What seed of intention are you prepared to plant in your own sacred soil tomorrow morning? The first 90 seconds of your day are the most valuable, fertile, and powerful moments you have. You can either give them away to the chaos of the world, or you can claim them for the creation of your own. Your challenge is simple, but it is not easy. For 1 week, make a sacred promise to yourself. You will not touch your phone for the first 90 seconds after you wake. Instead, you will lie in stillness, close your eyes, and simply feel the feeling of your greatest dream, as if it were your reality right now. That's it. This is not about visualization. It's about embodiment. What did you notice? How did your day change? Share your experience of this powerful protocol in the comments below. For more stories that provide the real, practical protocols used by the world's top manifestors, make sure you subscribe and join this community of conscious creators.